To you all. It's so pleased to see people from all over the country. A second and warm welcome to you again. We might have some new people on the room because we did notice that we had people from all over Canada today. So just a little brief introduction about Advanced Practice and who we are. So this is our team. The gentleman on the left, Dr. John Higginbottom, this was his idea. And so number of years ago, he approached the health board here in British Columbia and got some startup funds for us. And we were able to get this platform off the ground. So Jordan Clark helped us with technology. So we're very, very grateful to him. And today you're going to hear from two wonderful people. We have Manny and we have Jen. And we'll do a more formal introduction of Manny and Jen in just a little moment. But as mentioned, this project was funded by the Ministry of Health to provide leadership, education and guidance to the mental health field. And we're very, very grateful to people who deliver our webinars. So we probably have about 57 free webinars online at this point, because people do this for their love and their kindness and for wanting to advance the work in psychosocial rehabilitation. So we really appreciate that. And if you're new to this platform, please know that you're very welcome to access for free those archived webinars on our website at psyrehab.ca. So please give that a wee look if you haven't seen it before. Some very high quality and wonderful webinars on there. And we mentioned our purpose is really to advance the work of psychosocial rehabilitation and evidence-based practices, and just really to try and fan out what we know is working and to advance the work of recovery-oriented systems. And as Douglas College staff, we wish to acknowledge the Coquitlam and Kikwa First Nations, as well as all Coast Salish peoples on whose traditional and unceded territory we live, learn, work, and play. After this webinar, you will receive an email which will ask you for a little bit of feedback. And so we're really delighted to hear from you. We need you. We need that feedback to let us know if we're any good or rotten and how we can make things better. And if you have ideas for advancing this work as well. And maybe you have an interest in participating or presenting. And also just to bring you to top of mind, the Mental Health Commission of Canada has a number of really terrific webinars out there as well. And PSR Canada to download. Here in this presentation, you will hear how compassion is linked with the competencies of practice of Psychosocial Rehabilitation Canada. And we give you that link just right there. So if you're interested in just learning a little bit more about the competencies, for those of you who work in systems or maybe receive services within systems, we like to be explicit about what competencies are for people delivering services. So hopefully that helps you advance your work as well. And as I mentioned, we are always looking for presenters. So if you have an idea that you would like to speak about, if you are part of a great organization, I'm sure you are, that are doing great things, we really want to disseminate this information about across Canada. So let us know. And we will support you. So if a webinar is a new adventure for you, please know we are here to support you in any way we can. So we'll practice, we'll provide as much support as we can, and we know that you will be confident and people around the country can hear about your great work. So do stay in touch. And it's my great pleasure to introduce two people who have been working with us for, I think, maybe about 4 years now. Don't have a very good sense of time, I don't. But first person is Manny, who will speak to us today about the inner critic. And I think that's something we all have a very, very rich inner critic. So it'll be really great to hear about that. Manny is passionate about elevating the psychosocial well-being of all individuals, and she does this through working as a certified trauma recovery coach with manual connections. She also provides outreach, housing, skill development training, and formal education to trauma survivors in Cameroon. She is also one of the coordinators here with us in Advanced Practice and the author of a recently published book called The Cage Giant: From Victim Through Survivor. To Thriver, pardon me, so you may want to check that out. And Jen will be covering the components of self-compassion, and Jen as well is also a wonderful support to technology for us here at Advanced Practice, as is Manny, and she's been working in the mental health practice for a little while, for about 25 years. So in November 2014, she began her own business called Illuminate Wellness in order to share what she's learned about recovery and wellness with an even broader community. She currently offers wellness recovery action planning facilitator trainings across Canada, as wellness recovery action, self-determination, appreciative inquiry, self-compassion, and self-care workshops. She also recently completed writing a peer support training curriculum, which is a huge undertaking, and she works with PSR Advanced Practice and oversees the website and communications for PSR Canada. So you see that we have some amazing people with us today who happen to be also on staff as well. So am I a lucky person or what to work with these great individuals? So it is my great pleasure to pass you along to Manny at this point, and I'm just going to check out. Oh, I'm passing you along to Jen. I apologize. And I'm just going to check out of my video here. So over to Jen. Thank you kindly.
Hey everybody, I'm excited to be here. It's an important topic that I feel really passionate about, so I'm really pleased to be here to share it with you. I'm gonna tell you a couple secrets before I start, and I'm gonna encourage you to maybe follow suit with me. So since it's about self-compassion and we're gonna be talking about, just self-care, taking care of yourself, do what you can to make yourself comfortable. So most of you are probably sitting in an office, but if you can go grab a nice warm beverage, go for it. I also have a little heat pack on my back. So if you want to grab something like that, I'm sitting actually on my couch. I've got my pillows, and I also like oils and help me to stay calm when I'm nervous. So I've got, a few of those sitting here. So I'm going to encourage you, since this is all about self-care and taking care of yourself, to do something right now to take care of yourself. So I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Sorry. First of all, I would love to hear what is happening. There we go. I would love to hear, sorry. See, I'm nervous. I'm a little having technical issues, but I help everyone else with their technical issues, but then when I get nervous, I have trouble too. So anyway, so what we're gonna cover today, we are gonna dig deep into what self-compassion is and why it's important. We'll dig as deep as we can, but we could honestly take, a week to talk about this. So it's more of an overview, but we really want to look at what self-compassion is. And then I'm going to cover 3 components of self-compassion as defined by Kristin Neff. You know what? You can't see me. Can you guys see me?
Yeah.
You can? Okay. Okay, I can just see Regina in the corner.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. Anyway, this is Kristin Neff's book. It's called Self-Compassion. I highly recommend her work in this area. So she defines self-compassion in 3 areas. So self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. So we're going to dig into that. Manny is going to talk with us about the inner critic and how to work with the inner critic, because the inner critic definitely gets in the way of self-compassion a lot of times. And then we'll hopefully end with some ideas on how to implement self-compassion into our daily lives. So I would love to hear from you about what motivated you to join this session. Like Regina said, we have quite a few people signed up for this, more so than some other topics. So to me, it says that we're in a field where we're constantly giving out to other people, and we can get depleted. So I think these types of conversations are really important. But I'd love to hear from you if you have something you want to share about what intrigued you to join this and what you hope to get out of today. I would love to hear it. So if you want to type in, I'll wait for a minute. And if not, if you don't want to share, that's okay. Okay, someone says, I'm a grief counselor at hospice, and I'm mostly good. So I'm reading Brené Brown books, The Gift of Imperfection, and it seemed like a good fit. She mentioned Kristin Neff in the chapter I read last night. Yes, Kristin Neff and Brené Brown actually did a a collaboration on a self-compassion online workshop. It was great. So to pass along the knowledge to the support groups and others, I'm looking for tricks, feeling burned out after 28 years of psych nursing. I work in the downtown east side of Vancouver. Lots of people are affected by trauma. I work at MHRC and it can be very stressful. I'm always looking for ways to practice self-care. Thank you. Awesome. Well, I hope today, so my intention with this is to support you in your self-care because, and also Regina, if you could put the link to the competencies and also let us know, I forget which competency is about self-care, so maybe put that in the link as well. My thought is if we don't take care of ourselves first, we are going to burn out very quickly. So I really think that this is a super important topic. Okay, we've got a few more that I missed here. I work as a suicide prevention coordinator, so I hear about death and comfort others often. I understand that self-care is important. Feeling burned out about being a working mother, and the work that I do can get me down at times. Balancing, because we're always like taking care of things at work, and then we've got family commitments and all that, and that can be really hard to like, how do we put ourselves first? Sometimes it can feel hard to do that. So I work in the community at a safe injection site, and it can get overwhelming at times. Thank you. Having just returned to work in mental health ASTAT after post-concussion syndrome, I'm wanting to focus on self-compassion to continue my recovery and not overdo it. Thank you. I'm hoping to gain insight for self-care as I work with multi-barriered clients. Thank you. We've got a lot of comments. This is fabulous. Okay, I've been trained as a compassion fatigue trainer at my agency over the past few years. They have pushed my sessions away for the workers. It's been very difficult since workers need the support. So I thought I would get a refresher myself and hopefully try this out there again at my agency. That's great. Thank you. I spend a lot of time looking after others' needs and recovery in crisis. The downside is I spend more time on everyone else except me, until I see from others that I need to step back where I am now. Thank you. I work in peer support and I feel stressed sometimes. One of the message is always self-care, so hoping to learn other ways to do that. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing that. That's great. Oh, here we go. Very tired, working older adult, tertiary mental health, 25 years. In healthcare, and have recently started to practice yoga. Awesome. Working with high-risk population and nonprofit is draining. I'm experiencing some symptoms of overwork and not getting my personal focus done. Great. Thank you for sharing, everyone. Okay. Hopefully this is going to be edifying and good for you today. So I'm going to mention that Kristen Neff on her website has a self-compassion assessment, and you can go through it, and you can use this as a resource with the people you work with as well. You can go through it, and it assesses where you're at on the scale as far as how self-compassionate you are. So I don't have the link because it's too hard when you put a link on a slide. So all you have to do is go to Google and type in self-compassion assessment, and it should come up. So I encourage you to do that after we're done and just see where you're at. So this is a great quote by Jack Cornfield. If your compassion does not include yourself, it's incomplete. So often I know, so I'm speaking to you from a place of, I have learned how to have self-compassion, but it didn't come naturally to me, to be honest. I used to be very, very hard on myself. And, you know, I started to realize I can't keep giving and keep exercising compassion and then being super hard on myself, that I was going to not make it. So I started realizing that this is something I needed to work on. And actually, like, I had a moment a few years ago. I'm a RAP facilitator trainer, so I'm an advanced level facilitator trainer. And for those of you who are familiar with RAP out there, some of you actually are RAP facilitators, I'm sure, out there. we have something called the values and ethics that guides everything we do when we facilitate. And one of the values and ethics that we are like bound to live by is I will treat everyone in the group with unconditional high regard. And I remembered really like feeling uncomfortable about that one. It's like, you know, you read these things, these ethics and values, and they can feel easy, but if you actually think about them on a deeper level, it's like that is the hardest thing in the world to do, like to treat everyone in the group with unconditional high regard. So I started to unpack that quite a bit, and I'm like, okay, what if this person ends up in my workshop who I have a hard time with? And what if Brené Brown ends up in my workshop? How do I treat those people the same? You know, and I started kind of wrestling with that. And then I broke it down further, and I was like, you know what, if I don't know how to treat myself with unconditional high regard, if I'm allowing myself to ruminate on things and be critical of myself and nitpicky of myself, how is it even possible for me to have unconditional high regard for someone else? And that was like a big realization for me, that I was like, you know what, I need to work on accepting myself. I need to work on having grace when I mess up, and I need to not be so hard on myself. And as I learn to do that, it's going to be easier to fully, I don't know if it's fully possible, but to be able to hold other people up with unconditional high regard. So that was like the biggest kind of aha moment for me, that I was like, this is not, they're connected. They're connected. The connection of me honoring myself, and also in turn being able to honor people who show up in my workshops. So that kind of started me on the journey that I need to really start to look at this. How do I honor myself? How do I not ruminate on something for a week, which I used to do a lot of. And I don't know if you're out there can relate to that, but I really realized this was something I had to work on, especially if I'm going to really try to honor other people. So let's kind of look at first mindfulness. So mindfulness is a word that gets like thrown around a lot. We hear it all the time. And compassion. And we're talking about self-compassion, but compassion and self-compassion are not, they're related. They're not two different things. It's just taking that compassion that we would give to someone else and focusing it on us. So mindfulness is basically the basic human ability to be fully present to our experiences and our environment. So mindfulness involves curiosity, openness, and acceptance. Compassion is similar, but it's different. So compassion is feeling moved by the suffering of others and oneself, and feeling intentionally motivated to reduce that suffering. So it's mindful to the person experiencing the suffering. So a little less about the moment and more about the person experiencing it. So that means either, you know, the person we're working with, the person we are feeling compassion for, or in the case of self-compassion, it's like noticing our own suffering and feeling motivated to reduce our suffering and being mindful to ourself and what we're feeling in the moment. And I can tell you that a lot of us tend to want to stuff our feelings and not kind of face our feelings. So it's the biggest part of self-compassion is becoming attuned to what we're actually feeling and just accepting those feelings as they are. So this is a great quote by Brené Brown, and I probably will bring her up more than once in this webinar. She says, recognizing the light and dark in our shared humanity. So this is her definition of compassion. We commit to practicing loving kindness with ourselves and others in the face of suffering. So I think this is so cool because when we think about light and dark, you know, sometimes we're, okay, let me think. So we live in a culture today, especially, I don't know if any of you are on social media, I am, and I probably spend too much time on it, to be honest, but not just social media, but also just the news and TV and commercials. And we are bombarded with messages of perfection. We need to be better. We need to work on our stuff. We need to be smarter. We need to lose a few pounds, all those kinds of things we're like thrown at every day. And part of the whole idea of compassion and self-compassion is accepting our dark bits, accepting the bits of ourselves that maybe we don't love as much as we do the strengths, and just accepting it that it's part of who we are. And it's okay, it's good. Those bits define us as much as the light does. And when I treat myself with loving kindness, with my dark bits and my light bits, I am actually more likely to be able to work on the other stuff than if I can continue to push it away. It's so ironic in that way, that if we actually embrace the difficult bits of who we are, like the part of us, the qualities maybe that we don't love as much, the fact that we're maybe procrastinators or messy people or whatever. For me, it's always like finance stuff is really hard for me, and it can be a moment of shame if I let it turn into that. Like, I'm not very good with balancing checkbooks and things like that. So learning to acknowledge that that's part of who I am, and I can also work on that. So it's part of me, but I can learn to be better at that at the same time instead of avoiding it. So that integration of the light and dark of our personalities is super important when we think about compassion. And then this is a quote by Pema Chodron. She's a teacher, teaches on all this kind of stuff. I recommend her work too. Compassion is knowing our darkness well enough that we can sit in the dark with others. It's never a relationship between the wounded and the healed. It's a relationship between equals. And I think this is so important for those of us who work in the field too, because we can get into the mindset of we're here as the healed, as the helper, and we're kind of reaching down to support the people who are wounded. And I think like a big piece of compassion and self-compassion is knowing that we're in this too. We have our dark bits, we have our moments of struggle, we have our painful bits, we have our stressors and our anxieties, and embracing that helps us to be able to sit with other people in their struggle as well. And I think I've noticed in my time within mental health, there's more of a awakening to that, to acknowledging our full humanity. And I think it only makes the service better when we do that, instead of pretending that we're all together, we have it all together and we're perfect and all that kind of stuff. So there can be a tendency that we want to put on a good hat because we're here as the helper, but it really supports the relationship when we acknowledge that we're human too. So some interesting facts about compassion. I've been also listening to an audiobook by Kelly McGonigal on the science of compassion, and I highly recommend it. It's I think it's only an audiobook, and you can get it from a few different places, but also you can just Google the science of compassion and a zillion articles will come up. So I highly recommend doing that. But compassion actually strengthens the immune response. So I read last night actually about a study that was done with physicians. Actually, they studied 650 people, and they studied the compassion basically of practitioners. So what they found is they broke the group up into three sections, and then a third of them got kind of no interaction with a physician or a practitioner. The middle group got just the regular, you go and see the doctor, he kind of prescribes something. Oh, and this is for people who have a common cold. And then the third group, got doctors who were told to like deliver extra compassion and empathy, and there was 5 things, and I'm sorry I can't remember what those 5 things are, but they had to kind of within that time frame deliver those things. One was empowerment, empathy, encouragement, stuff like that. And what they found is that the people who had that interaction with their doctor actually had a heightened immune response, and they got over their cold a lot faster. So that's like fascinating, and they've studied it in other areas too. So compassion, it supports the immune response. It also lowers blood pressure. It reduces inflammation in the body. And this is also like receiving compassion, but giving compassion also supports good health. When we are compassionate, we have better health. And it improves our mental and emotional health, and it can be learned. It's not something that's like you have it or you don't. You can learn compassion. And actually compassion and loneliness are tied together. I was thinking of a project recently, of doing a project where like they've done some studies with lonely people, and they find that with lonely people, when we're really lonely, any of us, we tend to kind of stay in ourselves, right? And we don't really reach out. And that's one of the biggest parts of the biggest problems of loneliness, is we stay isolated. And they found when people learn to be compassionate with other people, it actually reduces their loneliness and supports self-compassion, and helps people be less depressed. So that's pretty fascinating. So actually giving compassion supports our health, and receiving it also supports our health. So if we switch it to kind of go self-compassion, you know, the sky's the limit. It can really enhance our health. So one thing I wanted to touch on, I don't want to stay here too much because of time, and we could spend a lot of time on this, is the whole idea of compassion fatigue. So that's something that we talk about a lot here. The thing is, if you look at the science of compassion, if we're actually engaged in compassion, we're not going to be depleted. It's going to actually make us feel better. But so Chris Germer writes about this, and he says it's more like empathy fatigue than compassion fatigue. So we're putting ourselves in someone else's shoes all the time, and not really focusing on our own well-being, and also the benefit that comes with actual compassion. So he says that this kind of can happen when we believe we are indispensable. So we put our role as like being too important. And one thing I like to talk about a lot in my work is the whole idea of self-determination. And I think when we learn to support people in their self-determination, we are actually taking less of a role, where it's beneficial because we're supporting them to be in the driver's seat of their life. And we're also saying that I'm here as a support. I'm not here, this is your life. It's not my life, and I'm here to support you, but you know, I'm not indispensable. I'm here for a season, and I'm here to support you with the environment of self-determination, but you are the most important person in your life, not me. And so that kind of, I don't like the word detachment, but that letting go of needing to see outcomes in people's lives is really important for someone else's self-determination and for our own health. And then the other thing that can happen is we start to feel resentment for the people we are supporting, which we can work through with, you know, also encouraging self-determination, having better boundaries, and making self-care a little bit more important. So what is self-compassion? It's no different than experiencing compassion for others. So we have to notice that we're struggling and suffering and respond to pain with kindness. It's learning to acknowledge and be with the pain instead of avoiding it. For example, offering understanding and kindness when we make mistakes, and honoring and accepting our own humanity. One thing, I love movies. I don't know if any of you are movie buffs like me, but there is a movie a sci-fi movie really, that I love. And has anyone seen Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio? Anyone? If you haven't, it's a fun movie. But anyway, the whole idea of the movie is they implant ideas in people. So they go into like this kind of dream state and they implant ideas from people. And there's a quote that I think is so powerful when we think about compassion and self-compassion. And it's the Leonardo DiCaprio character says it. And he says, an idea is like a virus, resilient, highly contagious, and even the smallest seed of an idea can grow. It can grow to define or destroy us. And I think, anyway, so think about that. So an idea gets implanted and it can grow, and it can either define or destroy us. And part of the importance of self-compassion is not pushing away the whole idea of feeling bad. So for example, if I say, can everyone see this blue painting behind me? If I say, don't think about this blue painting behind me, you're all probably thinking about the blue painting behind me. So by trying to like avoid something, what we're actually doing is making it louder in our minds. So if I say, I'm not going to do this, it actually becomes louder. So a big piece of self-compassion is not avoiding it. Let's just feel what we need to feel. And then, don't think of pink elephants with white polka dots. Exactly. So all of a sudden now you're thinking about pink elephants with white polka dots. And there's actually been studies about this too, where if you tell someone to not think about something, they like tracked how many times you thought about it during like a certain amount of time. And then for the other group, they said, think about this, whatever the topic is, whether it was pink elephants. And the people who they said to think about it didn't think about it as much as the people who said not to think about it, if you catch what I'm saying. So avoiding it actually makes it more present in our lives. So with self-compassion, we are supporting feeling our feelings, feeling our pain, letting the pain come like waves instead of avoiding it. So I'm feeling bad. I'm going to acknowledge that I'm feeling bad. I'm going to sit with it without ruminating on it and then let it go. So that's like the biggest piece, is that we don't want to avoid the pain because we tend to run away from pain or stuff it. And that's not helpful for our health. So the biggest piece is we want to be able to feel it. So I'm going to pass it. Let me see. I just have a couple more slides, and then I'm going to pass it to Manny, and then I'll finish off after Manny's done. So basically what we want to do is we want to kind of hone our inner coach or our mentor. So most of us have like a part of us, and Manny's going to go deeper into the inner critic in a minute. Our inner critic comes from our different experiences, maybe people who've said nasty things to us over time, and it begins to become a voice in our own mind telling us, you're stupid, you're dumb, why do you always do this? You always screw this up. You know, I think most of us can relate to having an inner critic. And what we want to do is, and our inner critic is there for a reason. It's there to protect us. And I think that's important, that we can go, I know what you're trying to do. I know you're trying to protect me right now, but I'm actually going to ignore you, and I'm going to try to listen to my inner coach instead. So our inner coach is your own inner wisdom and resilience. It has a lot to do with self-talk and changing your tone and your words. So I'm going to encourage you to think of past coaches or mentors that supported and loved you, and think of how they spoke to you and how they, the messages that they gave you. So change your self-talk to reflect that kind of voice. I'll tell you a quick story and then I'll pass it to Manny. I was someone I was never an athletic person. I was never very good at sports. And this one time I decided I'm going to join track. So I joined track because my dad was always really good at track, but I had asthma, so I wasn't that good. But I would go to all the practices. I would go show up all the time. And this one time I was at a track meet, and it was the first time I got a ribbon, and I got third, but there was only 3 of us running. So I actually got last. So, but I kind of tried to tuck that away and go, okay, well, that's good. At least I won a ribbon. But I knew quite well that I was not really the person on the team that was making it for the team. I never won. I just wasn't that good. I wasn't the one that, there was lots of people who were much better than me. I would say I was probably the worst on the team. So this one day after this particular race, I'm sitting on the grass and feeling really sorry for myself and going, why do I suck at this so much? I try really hard, but I'm like, I just really am not good. And I'm like letting this tape play. My coach came and sat beside me on the grass, and he looks at me and he says, Jen, if everyone on our team was like you, we'd have a winning team. And I just looked at him and I went, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm the worst on the team. What are you saying? I thought he was like totally, I thought he was totally being sarcastic. And then he went into it and he said, no, he's like, you show up for all the practices and you really put your whole heart in. And if everyone on the team did that, we would have a winning team. And that moment, let me tell you, I was 15 years old at the time. And that changed so much for me. And now today, when I think about my inner coach, I think about him and I go, I need to speak to myself like he spoke to me that day. And I need to, when I start hearing this nastiness in my head, I need to go, wait a minute, I'm going to channel, I forget what his name was, but anyway, I need to channel his voice and go, I need to be kinder to myself because it's important for me to be kind. So anyway, that's a little story about that. And just one little bit that self-compassion is an antidote to shame. So we'll talk a little bit more about shame when we come back. So the curious paradox is that when I accept myself as I am, then I can change. And that's like pretty wild. And Kristen Neff's studies also have proven that the more we are self-compassionate with ourselves, we're actually able to have more personal responsibility. So sometimes we can be afraid that we'll be too easy on ourselves if we're self-compassionate, but the research actually says the opposite, that we are more likely to change if we fully accept ourselves. Okay, Manny, I'm going to pass it to you. Sorry, I went a little bit longer, and then we're going to come back to me after, and I'm going to go through the different sections of self-compassion. So here you go.
Okay. Thank you, Jane. Okay, hello everybody. Today I'll be talking on a portion of the presentation on self-compassion, and I'm so excited to co-present with Jane, and I'm also excited that you all decided to join us today. So thank you for being here. Regina and Jane both mentioned the core competencies on the PSR Canada website, so I won't go through it, although I had it on the slide because Regina she put a link of it on the comments and also a portion of what I had on the slides. The objective of my section, let's see, I think I have to, okay, so the objective of my portion of the slide of the presentation is for us to become aware of the inner critic and self-blame, and also to learn some techniques to quiet criticism and offer kindness to ourselves instead. In order to proceed, I would like to answer the question, what does self-compassion mean to me? And I'll answer that with a story. A few years ago, I walked into a room and I noticed everything seemed normal. 3 people were in a corner chatting. One person's head was buried in their phone, possibly typing a text message. Another was staring at a computer, perhaps watching a video on YouTube. And slowly I moved my gaze to another corner of the room, and I saw a lady who had silent tears rolling down her cheeks. At that moment, I recognized she was suffering in some ways, and I was motivated to go towards her to find out what I could do to help her improve her well-being if she would if she would let me help. So as I began walking towards her, I heard a monologue within me saying, what do you think you're doing? She doesn't need your help. What if you go over there and instead make her more uncomfortable? You are not good enough to handle the situation. At that moment, I froze in my tracks. I did not proceed to do what I had planned. You see, compassion is the concern we feel for another person's well-being and take actions to relieve the people from their suffering. But you can also be that person suffering. This is where self-compassion arises. It is when we notice our own sufferings and we take actions towards relieving ourselves from that suffering. So to me, the process of moving from suffering to self-compassion is a three-step process. The first step is awareness, to be aware of ways we are not being compassionate to ourselves and ways we can grow towards self-compassion. And also to use an approach, like there are so many things like mindfulness and some of the things Jane mentioned, which I'm also going to talk about. And finally, to take action, because it is not enough for us to have awareness and know the approach, but we do not take any action. Like in my little story, I was aware of the suffering of another person. I thought about it and I felt it, but that is just empathy. I did not go a step further to use an approach or action to help relieve the person from her suffering, because I was also suffering internally from the words in me, which prevented me from taking actions to show self-compassion. So this is one of the reasons why it is very important for us to first help ourselves in order to be able to help others. As human beings, there are so many ways that we are not being kind to ourselves. And irrespective of the many reasons we give for this unkindness, it all boils down to the inner critic or self-blame. See, awareness gives us the opportunity to understand ourselves better, to understand our thoughts, our strengths, our weaknesses, our beliefs, our emotions, and our actions, so we can be conscious of the areas where we need to grow in self-compassion. Okay, I think I messed up on my slide here. Oh, what's going on? Sorry, I think I messed up on my slides. Let's see. Slideshow from the beginning. Okay. Yeah. So we're talking about the inner critic. Sorry about the slides mix-up. So one thing we all need to be aware of is the inner critic, who I believe is present in almost every one of us, if not everybody. So the inner critic is the voice which judges and demeans us. I once heard someone say, tell the negative committee that meets in your head to sit down and shut up. And life would be so interesting if we could just tell that committee to be quiet and listen and obey for good. But sadly, that is not the reality. A lot of our personal suffering comes from the conversation in our mind, which is often revealed through the words we say to ourselves and the actions we take. Although we often talk about the inner critic, our inner conversation is not always negative. As Jane mentioned, there's also the inner coach. So we have both the inner coach and the inner critic. But the conversation becomes unhealthy based on how harsh it is and how it prevents us from or how it pushes our lives towards a negative direction. While our inner coach is the voice which encourages us, like saying, keep going, you're doing a good job, or you can do it. These voices within us have been formed over a period of time, and they were created through previous experiences. What happened in our lives, the meaning we attach to the events, and how we think about them, and what we can do as well. It also originates from what the authority figures in our lives said and how they reacted to it, the meaning we got out of the experience as well. For example, you and I can have the same experience, but if we interpret it differently, or if the authority figures in our life react to it differently, we tend to think about it from a different direction. Yours might produce the inner coach, while mine will produce the inner critic. So yours can empower you, like the story Jane said at the end of her presentation, while mine might end up disempowering me. To help us gain more awareness of the inner critic, I would like to look at the 7 types of inner critic, as pointed out by J. Ellie and Bonnie West. They co-authored a book titled Freedom from the Inner Critic, and these 7 steps are from that book. The first is the perfectionist. This critic is the one who tries to get us to do things perfectly. It wants us to look perfect, to be perfect, to speak perfectly, and it sets high standards of things we would like to accomplish. And it can prevent us from also taking any actions, because we may not want to do anything unless we are certain that we are going to do it perfectly. Someone without this critic might have the opinion that they can do what they would like to do, because what matters is just doing the best they can at the moment. But this inner critic would tell us, you have to do it perfectly. You are not going to do it unless it's perfect. So this critic, it conceals progress for perfection. The second inner critic they mentioned is the controller. And this critic tends to want to control every impulse, eating, drinking, talking, or walking. And it tells you you're not doing it right, or you're not doing it fast enough. It doesn't want you to get out of control at any moment. The intention of this critic is for us to be a good person. Like Jane mentioned, the inner critic is there to protect us. So it wants us to be accepted and to function well in the society. And that's okay, because sometimes it works for us at a moment in our life when maybe we're in a traumatic situation, so it was a coping mechanism at that time. But the question is, does it still work for us at this moment? Is it something we want to keep practicing, or do we have to be compassionate towards ourselves and take actions not to get overwhelmed by the voice of this inner critic in our mind? We are going to talk about the actions later in this webinar. So the controller, it wants us to do things in a specific manner. This critic is cautious and doesn't give any room or any option to explore. It wants us to follow a set pattern. The third kind they mentioned is a taskmaster. And I call this the workaholic critic, because it wants us to work harder and never take any time for ourselves. It fears that that we might be mediocre and we will be judged as a failure if it doesn't push us to keep going. So it pushes us to do more, to accomplish more in order to be accepted or to get noticed for the work we do. The fourth kind they mentioned is the underminer. And this critic keeps telling us that failure is inevitable. So it diminishes our self-confidence and our self-esteem. So we don't get out of our comfort zone. It's like if you get out of your comfort zone, you're just going to fail. So it undermines our abilities and our confidence. It makes us afraid of putting ourselves out there in situations where we can fail or make direct attacks towards taking any chance at all. The fifth kind dimension is a destroyer. And this critic, it attacks our self-worth in particular. It makes us to feel that we do not deserve to exist, or like it is harsh, and is a kind of critic which pushes us towards self-hatred. It makes us to feel awful about ourselves and not entitled to love or respect. So each time we have thoughts about not being loved, not being worthy, this is the work of the inner critic. And if we can, it's good to tune in and turn it around to the inner coach, like Jane mentioned. So if you have an inner coach, this might be a moment for you to turn around and tune to the voice of the inner coach within you. The seed is the guilt tripper, and this critic, it keeps us in the past and makes it difficult to forgive ourselves for the wrongs we have done or the people who hurt us. Like later, we're going to talk about self-blame, how we blame ourselves for whatever negative experience we've gone through. So this is the work of the guilt tripper, which makes us to feel we have to keep living in the past. We can't let go of the past. We're not going to forgive ourselves for the wrongs we have done or the people who hurt us. So this is a critic. It won't tell you made a mistake, but it will say you are a mistake, which are two different things. The seventh one is the molder. This critic tries to get us to fit into a certain mold based on standards held by society and culture or by our family. It's, I call it a people-pleasing one because it's something I can relate to a lot of these inner critic, but this is one which it totally relates to me. So the people-pleasing one is the one which wants us to be who everyone wants us to be. And it wants us to be liked and admired and to protect us from being abandoned, from being shamed, or from being rejected. It makes us to do things in order to fit in. It causes a disconnection between who we are or who others want us to be. It's motivated by trying to make us to be a person who is accepted by all. And we all know it is impossible to please everyone in our lives. This is why we need self-compassion, so we can put our own needs into consideration as well. I once heard Ed Sheeran, I think I'm not sure that's the right pronunciation. He once said, he doesn't know the key to success, but the key to failure is trying to please everyone. So this is the mother who is like trying to tell us you have to do things in a certain way in order to fit in. We can approach the inner critic from the perspective of listening from the position of an observer, not from a position of judgment. When we listen from the position of the observer, we come to our thoughts from a place of being aware, becoming aware of what is going on in our mind. And when we do this, we create an open field. We create a neutral field between the critic and ourselves. When we do that, we diminish the control of the negative critic within us, because it is making a point. I like to remind myself of approaching the inner critic from the position of an observer through my relationship with my thought lab, because it's like when you fight them, they always fight you back. But when you're an observer, you get to realize that, oh, they are simply making a point. So you ask yourself, what point is it making? And it's not dictating to you at that moment. It's making a point. But if you want to fight it back, it sounds like it's dictating to you. But when you observe and you are cautious of what it's saying, you can pick out the points from it and then ask yourself, was this a coping mechanism at some points in my life? And does this coping mechanism still work for me? Does it still serve my best interest? Or is it something I would like to change and find a better way to cope with the situation? So the second way we suffer internally is through self-blame. Well, before going to self-blame, some actions we can take is to love ourselves. I'm not sure. Okay, I'm not sure what happened. Okay. I'm not sure what happened to my slide again. Okay. Yeah, I'm not so good at technology, so pardon me. I need to practice some self-compassion here. Okay.
Take your time, Annie. You're doing good.
Thank you, Regina. Thanks for the compassion.
It's always very stressful when that happens. Like it's happened to me often.
Yeah, okay. So the next thing to be aware of is self-blame. And the most disturbing inner sufferings are those which originate from self-blame as a result of maybe a traumatic experience we had at some point in our life. We often have thoughts like, I didn't think fast enough, I'm not beautiful enough, if not, it wouldn't have happened to me, or I never do anything right, I am unworthy, nobody loves me, or it's all my fault, or I'm a bad person, I'll never amount to anything. When these thoughts come to our mind repeatedly, And worse still, if we go a step further to mention it, it becomes our reality, not because it is true, but because we've repeated it over and over, it now sounds like the truth and no longer the lie it was at the beginning. So within each one of us, we somehow blame ourselves for our traumatic encounters. And I can relate to this because I've had a series of traumatic encounters in my own life. So we might not blame ourselves on the act, but we might blame ourselves on the aftermath, maybe the way we handle it after that. So in order to be compassionate towards ourselves, we have to acknowledge that those are just thoughts and that those thoughts can be changed. But we can also approach the self-blame in three ways. To me, the first way to approach it is through distinguishing between taking responsibility and self-blame. I realize this so much talk about taking responsibility. And sometimes as people who have experienced trauma, we tend to think taking responsibility means it is my fault. It means I'm to blame for the actions of others and for the occurrence of events, especially the negative events. But to me, I tend to look at it when I'm being compassionate to myself. I tend to look at it as taking responsibility means I may not be responsible for what happened to me. I may not be responsible for the act or for the actions of other people, but I am willing to do whatever it takes to move forward from this position. I'm willing to do my role of moving forward from the situation, while on the other hand, self-blame will keep me stuck because it keeps me thinking of the past, of saying, okay, I blame myself for what happened to me, but taking responsibility is like looking forward towards the future. Instead of looking at the past, which will keep me stuck, but taking responsibility on what I can do at this moment in order to have a better future. So the second way is to forgive ourselves. We have to stop tormenting ourselves for the things we are saying would not have happened if we had done something different. Like you could be telling yourself, it would not have happened if I did not leave the house at that time. So you blame yourself for going out, or I would not have been tortured or neglected if I wasn't born, and you blame yourself for being born, or you blame yourself for not speaking out about an incident which happened in childhood earlier. And I can totally relate to that because in my own incidents which happened in my childhood, I didn't tell my family about it until maybe my early 20s. So I was not at peace with myself. So I wasn't really compassionate towards myself at that time. I was constantly worried and stressed because of the secret within me. And the more I thought about it, the more my body ached. And in fact, I used to have like a whole drama going on in my head during that time. There were at least 3 characters at the time arguing about their reasons to be angry and to hold on to their hurts. And I usually end up with a headache by the time they are done. So to me, I had to go through the process of learning to forgive myself and to forgive those versions of me because they were right. They had their reasons to be angry, but I had not forgiven them, which is still myself, but I had not forgiven myself for those aspects in my life. So as I learned to forgive myself, I learned to diminish the critics within me. And it might sound unusual, but I had forgiven everyone who hurts me. So this is why we have to practice self-compassion, because sometimes we find it easy to forgive other people, but not to forgive ourselves. For me, as part of my faith, I had learned very early in my life, even before my first traumatic incident, on the importance of forgiveness. So it was easier for me to forgive others but no one had ever taught me I had to forgive myself. So self-compassion is like whatever you do to others, you should also extend it to yourself. If you're being kind to others, be kind to yourself as well. If you forgive others, you should forgive yourself as well. Often we strive to resolve conflicts with other people, but we fail to resolve it within ourselves. If you have to truly resolve a conflict, it has to begin with you. Because somewhere within you, there's a reason why you blame yourself. And if you don't resolve the conflict within you, and if I come to you, for example, and I say, I've forgiven you for what you did to me, but I've still not forgiven myself, then when I think of my role in it or whatever way I'm blaming myself, I'm going to roll on the pain in my mind and still have that pain towards you. So to me, I look at it like I've not really forgiven you because I still have you in my mind because I've not forgiven myself for my role in it. So to get rid of this pain and the chance of it occurring when I think about it, I think it's very important for us to forgive ourselves as well. Don't personalize it. Don't personalize whatever the traumatic experience is, because you have to recognize that you are not the sole creator of the choices of others. If you have a role in influencing their choice, it is probably insignificant. So that could be what we keep in our mind when we want to forgive ourselves, because we should not just take the entire responsibility for what is going on. It is not entirely our fault. We should not personalize it. Everyone is responsible for their actions. The third approach to practice, to get rid of self-blame or to minimize self-blame, is for us to examine our beliefs and pick out the lies from the truth. Most of our beliefs were ingrained in us during childhood or at different stages in our life. Some of these beliefs were empowering and they help us to be kind to ourselves. But other beliefs are negative and they limit our abilities. So we tend to treat ourselves based on these beliefs. Some of those beliefs were based on wrong facts or the opinions of other people. So it might not possibly help you at this moment to empower you. For example, if we acted in a certain way at some point in our life and something happens, we tend to believe that it is always going to happen that way. So we withhold grace from ourselves. We do not leave the room for us to do it again, because we feel like in future circumstances, we are going to have the same outcome, which will not be favorable. But when we practice self-compassion, we also have to realize it may have happened in a certain way at that time, but we have to give ourselves some grace. We don't have to hold on to those beliefs, even if they don't work for us anymore. We have to examine our beliefs and ask ourselves, is this true, or is this a lie? Is there any truth in it, or is it just the opinion of one person, which one person is like one in billions of people in the world? So it's good to examine those beliefs that have been planted in us to see if they're actually the truth for us at this time in our life, or they're just lies which we should not hold on to anymore. So some of the actions we can take to grow towards self-compassion is to observe our feelings. Our feelings often inform us of what we are thinking about. If we feel down about a situation, we can flip it around and look at the situation as a learning process and think of the lessons we can pick out of that experience. Also, what I like to do is I like to talk back to the inner critic, or the voice of blame within me. Like, for example, if I want to take my kids out to the playground and I hear the voice telling me, you are not a good mom. What makes you think if you take your kids out to the playground, you're going to be a good mother? Or what makes it now make you a better person? So I like to talk back to my inner critic. I might say, well, I don't need to take my kids out to the playground to prove that I am a good mom, because I know I am a good mom. I don't need to prove it. I'm taking them out because I believe that is what is good for us at this moment. But if I don't talk back to it, if I just sit back and say, oh, well, maybe you're right, maybe I'm not a good mom, I will sit back and then I won't go out and I will be grumpy the whole time I'm in there. But if I talk back to my inner critic, I'm able to give it a voice and then use my own consciousness or my own mindfulness to respond to the inner critic. So it's always good for us to define ourselves, to be clear about what we want, or we can make a list of empowering things, like what to say to ourselves. Like, for example, I just said, I know I am a good mom. At one point, that was a list of things that I had to tell myself in order not to listen to the voice, in order not to accept the opinion of the inner critic. Just to, after observing it, I'm like, okay, I've listened to you, I hear your point, but I believe this is who I am, or this is what my inner coach is telling me. It's always good to have that list of empowering things we can say to ourselves. So how can you be more compassionate towards yourself? For example, how can you speak more kindly to yourself? I just mentioned about making a list of empowering things you can say to yourself. Whatever choice you make, try to bring in the spirit of love, care, and kindness to you and to others. How you treat yourself should not come from how others treat you, because you are too valuable. So don't give another person the power to control your worth. Whatever you're trying to do, if you're being good to other people, be good to yourself as well. Because if, going back to the story at the beginning, if I'm not kind to myself, I might not show kindness to someone else fully like I would have loved to do it. So I'll pass it on to Jane to continue from here. Thank you.
Oh, I lost the place. Okay, here we go. There we go. Okay, so question for all of you. I have a lot to cover. I'm going to do my absolute best to finish by noon. Would you be okay if I went a little bit past noon? Of course you can leave because, you know, you're online. Is that okay with some people? I'll do my best to try to end, but just in case, I might go a little bit longer if that's okay. Okay, good. Good, thank you. Thank you, Manny. That is awesome. Thank you for sharing all that. So before we dig into the different components of self-compassion from Kristen Neff's research, I just want to say a little bit more about just the whole idea of self-compassion as a whole. So I talked about it a little bit before, about the whole idea of pain and resistance equals suffering. So what we're talking about here is, how do we stop resisting pain? How do we start kind of embracing our pain? Another scene, famous scene in a movie. Has anyone seen Good Will Hunting? Good Will Hunting with Matt Damon, and Robin Williams plays the counselor. Yes, classic movie. There's some movie people on here, I can tell. Anyway, so there's this scene where Robin Williams is the counselor and Matt Damon is getting counseling, and he has like a history of real traumatic abuse from his dad. And Robin Williams says to him, "It's not your fault." And he's like, yeah, I know it's not my fault. And then he says it again. And he's like, yeah, I know it's not your fault. I know it's not my fault. And then he says it again and again until it like hits him. And he first gets angry, and he like then all of a sudden understands what that means, that it's not my fault. And then he breaks down and starts crying. And I think that scene is so powerful because it illustrates sometimes how we deal with pain, that we just stuff it and don't really face it. And this can be big pain, but it's also little things like having a bad day. You know, sometimes like a self-compassionate response to having a bad day is just sitting down and going, gosh, this is a hard day. I'm having a hard day. I'm really having a hard time. And just taking a few minutes for yourself and then moving on. So it's very dangerous to keep stuffing our feelings. I like to describe it as like, imagine you have an unlimited amount of feathers. You stuff all the feathers into a box. You keep stuffing it, and then you seal the box with a little bit of Scotch tape. Eventually, the Scotch tape is gonna, break, and the feathers are gonna explode and go everywhere. And that's what happens with our feelings. Like our feelings, stuffing our feelings, obviously most of us know this, and we know this when we're supporting other people, but it sometimes doesn't go together when we think about our own suffering and pain. But eventually, we stuff it so much that it's going to explode, and all of a sudden then we're going to like break down, and we're going to need to take time off work, and we're going to have, we get to a point. We are not immune to depression, anxiety, and struggle. And the more we stuff, the more open we are to experiencing our own crisis. So taking even those small moments to go, I am really having a hard day, and I'm going to sit with this for a little bit, and I'm going to feel it. I'm not going to swim in it, but I'm going to feel it, and then I'm going to go on with my day. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to do something self-soothing, and then I'm going to go on with my day. And I think that's one of the most powerful things that I have learned. And I kind of actually, interestingly enough, I was researching, I did a presentation on self-compassion for a PSR BC conference a few years ago. I don't know if any of you were there, but I was prepping for it this one day, and I had just done 3 days of prep for a different workshop. And it was like, I offered it as a free workshop, and I put in a lot of time prepping it, and I did it. Guess how many people showed up? 0. Nobody came. And I felt like crap. I'm like, oh, well, nothing, you know, the lies that come. It's like, nobody wants to, I have nothing. I'm a fraud. I've got nothing to say. And all these lies started coming to me. And I'm like, I'm in this business, but like I'm doing this as a business, but why am I even doing this? I need to quit what I'm doing. And all this stuff was like coming at me. This was the next day. And I was researching the workshop I was going to do on self-compassion for PSR BC. And then all of a sudden I was like, you know what? This is not self-compassionate. This is like terrible what I was doing to myself. So I just laid on the couch and I cried a little because no one came to my workshop, and that really sucks. And I allowed myself to be sad. And I wasn't like, what am I going to do next time? How am I going to make it better? I just was sad about it. And then all of a sudden it wasn't as painful anymore, and I was able to go on with my day. So that was a huge learning for me, just to allow the pain to come and then let it go and not push it and avoid it, because it's easy to like try to avoid those things so that we don't feel them. And barriers to self-compassion, there are things that keep us away from self-compassion, and that is getting lost in our suffering. So also there's a fine balance to feeling the pain. And people often describe it as feeling the pain almost as an observer, like without judgment, like not judging the feeling, just kind of like feeling the pain, but also honoring that we're more than this pain. We're more than the pain that we're feeling right now, but I'm going to allow myself to feel it. Just as we feel joy, you know, like when we hold too tightly to any emotion, it actually can be detrimental. If we hold too much to the good moments too, then it's even more painful when the pain comes. And one thing we know is that all human beings have pain. Pain is just part of life. So getting lost in our suffering keeps us from self-compassion, avoiding pain, and then our instinct to withdraw from other people is also a problem. And then self-criticism and shame. And shame is, when I talk about shame, I'm talking about like more so the idea that I am bad versus, or I am stupid versus I did something that's kind of dumb. You know, that's kind of different. That's like the difference between shame and like guilt. The way Brené Brown talks about it is like defining ourselves by whatever the bad thing is. Anyway, and also caring too much about other people's opinions can keep us from self-compassion. So anyway, I wanted to say that before we dig into these other slides. So the next bit, this is a loving kindness meditation, and this is something, here, this is another book that I recommend. I don't know if you can see that. It's Christopher Germer, PhD, The Mindful Path to Self-Compassion, very good. And he talks about loving kindness meditations. And this is basically, he encourages, well, it's kind of known within this field to do this. You know, the thing with self-compassion, it's a practice. So it's something we have to do regularly, and it's not a one-time fix. So it takes time because we're trying to change the environment within ourselves. So it's a practice. It's something we need to do all the time. So the idea of a loving kindness meditation is to do this fairly regularly every day, even more than once a day, and say these words to yourself. May I be safe. May I be at peace. May I be kind to myself. May I accept myself as I am. May my joy and happiness continue to grow. May I care for myself with ease. You can also do this around compassion, and you can say like, may everyone I am with be safe. May everyone be at peace. So you can do it both ways. So what we're doing here with loving kindness meditation, it's about the whole idea of, sorry, the garbage people came, so I don't know if you can hear that, but anyway, words shape our experiences. So what we're doing is we're actually saying words that will help shape the way we experience life. So it's not going to make maybe even any difference in the moment, but it's about creating acceptance. It's about planting an idea, kind of like what I talked about at the beginning when I talked about Cobb, planting an idea. So what we're doing with this is we're planting a positive idea that we want to grow. So it uses also the power of connection. So I encourage you to do this. I made, I'll show you this. I'll send you the link after. I made cards that are self-compassion practice cards right here. And I'll send you a link to it at the, maybe not today, maybe on Monday. And you can download them and print them. And there's 8 different ones on supporting a practice. So one is feel the pain and don't get lost in it, and give some ideas on how to do that. Give yourself a hug, because we know that touch is really important, like an even touch from yourself. Like I often will just put my hand right on my arm if I feel like I need comfort. There's one that says challenge your inner critic. When you feel shame, offer kindness. And there's one with the loving kindness meditation right on there. Be your own coach and ally, and savor a moment and practice gratitude. So I'll send these to you. You can cut them out and put them in your planner. And if you feel like you need to pull one out and remind yourself to do it, then you can do it. So I'm going to dig into the 3 components of self-compassion. And this comes again from Kristen Neff's work. So there are 3 components: self-kindness, mindfulness, and common humanity. So when we talk about self-kindness, the opposite of self-kindness is self-judgment. So kind of like letting the inner critic go. So we want to offer that self-kindness versus the judgment. So self-compassion is about kindness towards ourselves, extending the same understanding, warmth, and love to ourselves as we would to other people we love. One thing we know is that having compassion for others and compassion for ourselves, they're connected, but if someone is very compassionate towards other people, it doesn't always mean that they're compassionate to ourselves. So they're separate. A lot of people who have a lot of compassion for others have a lot of self-judgment for themselves. So self-compassion is something we all need to work on. So when we exercise self-compassion, we don't judge, self-flagellate, or criticize ourselves. And self-compassion is not self-pity. So we all benefit when we receive tenderness and a gentle approach. And the person we need this, the person we need this from the most is ourselves, and we benefit from self-soothing. One thing we do know is that when we criticize ourselves and judge ourselves, we are actually engaging the sympathetic nervous system. So we're having a lot of cortisol pumping through our body. And we know, all of us know, that that's not healthy for us. So even that self-judgment, that self-criticism is bad for our health. So we want to offer kindness instead. And it's hard to do, but again, it's a practice that we can learn to do over time. So yeah, I just said that. Self-criticism, we have high levels of cortisol. We are the attacker and the attacked. And sometimes we can think that our inner critic is going to help us and motivate us, but we know actually that it doesn't work that way. It actually keeps us stuck. So we want to not engage with that inner critic. And again, that it's those negative tapes we play over and over in our minds. And I can tell you that I'm a recovering self-flagellator, because I used to do this all the time. I'd get stuck. Like something would happen at work, especially early on in my career, where I'd do something or say something that I would go home and go, holy cow, I just said like the stupidest thing I've ever said in my life. And I would ruminate over it for days. Anyone else relate to this? Where I would ruminate and ruminate. Probably the person barely noticed that I said it, but it would just play over and over. And I would allow this tape to continue playing instead of challenging it. I've learned a lot about not doing that now, but it was a long, hard journey for me. So Self-compassionate approach to self-criticism is noticing that criticism and choosing to offer kindness and self-soothing instead. We acknowledge and honor the chat's covering this for me, the pain. For example, the other day, well, I mentioned in my bio that I finished writing a curriculum. It was a long process. It took about 5 years to work on. And then we offered the pilot program. The manual ended up being about 300 pages. So it's good, it's big. And my challenge was, how do I get this into a 5-day training? And I went in knowing that I was not going to do it perfectly. And I fight with that sometimes, because part of me goes, I should go in and do a perfect job because I have that high expectation. And I challenged that right from the beginning. So we did this 5-day training, and I knew going in that this is a pilot and this is something that I'm not going to end it thinking it was perfect, because refining it is part of the process. And that helps me a lot, because I don't know about you, but sometimes we put on this really high expectation that we need to be perfect. And if we can't do it perfectly, it's not worth doing. But what we don't think about is everyone has to mess up to learn. Messing up is part of the process of learning. And if I don't create space for imperfection, then I'm not going to learn, and I'm going to stay stuck. So that was huge for me, just letting go of the need for it to be perfect and having grace when it wasn't. So the next piece that Kristen Neff talks about is common humanity versus isolation. What tends to happen when we're hard on ourselves is we isolate. We become stuck in our head, or we don't connect with other people. We feel like we're all alone, right? We feel like I'm the only person who's ever felt this before. And that's simply not the case. So what we know is we're not alone. Part of being human is being imperfect. We have fierce grace for our mistakes and failures. And I say fierce, and I would also say fierce self-compassion and fierce kindness for yourself, because it's actually very active, not passive. So being kind and offering that grace for failure is really important to have that fierceness. And we need to change our perspectives about mistakes. And that, to me, has been one of the biggest supports with self-compassion practice. If I go into something knowing that mistakes are a part of the process and it's not a bad thing, and I've really wrestled with that myself, it's made things a lot easier for me, and I don't ruminate the way I used to. And it's really shifted a lot. I don't know if anyone can relate to that, shifting that experience of mistakes, and if that's supported you. We could talk about that a lot more, but we're running out of time. I'm sorry. So common humanity is when we are more accepting and loving to ourselves. When we fail or suffer, we create an opportunity for connection. That's what I love about the whole idea of peer support is that whole connection, that we're in this together. And I think we can learn a lot from that in other aspects of life, is just that commonness, that we all suffer, we all struggle, and we can instead reach out to other people than staying isolated and stuck in our own heads. And that's very powerful learning for me. So, and again, kind of like what I talked about with the coach, is like channeling our inner Mr. Rogers. So understanding that we have value regardless of how we perform or succeed is so huge as a part of self-compassion. So once it's safer to fail, then we are all able to offer ourselves self-compassion when we make mistakes. We're less afraid of failure and more likely to get back up when we fall down, and our self-worth goes up. Powerful. And I tell some stories, but I'm running out of time, so I I won't. But anyway, so that's a big piece. That's so we already talked about self-kindness and offering a kindness to ourselves when we're in struggle versus the judgment, and then common humanity versus isolation. The last piece is mindfulness versus over-identification. So over-identification is when we get stuck in the mud, and most of us can relate to this. Either we've experienced it ourselves, or we've gotten stuck in our stories and our narratives, or we've seen other people that we care about and support get stuck in their story. So the way to do this is to kind of approach it with mindfulness and notice our suffering. Stuffing our feelings never turns out very well. So pay attention and go, wow, I'm suffering right now. I'm struggling. I'm having a hard day. I'm going to be with this pain right now. And pause, be with the pain instead of reacting to it. And we can tend to jump into a problem-solving mode, which is another form of avoidance, right? We're avoiding the pain if we jump into problem-solving it. Be with it for a little while and not with self-pity. So kind of like, I've heard people describe emotions like weather. So like weather comes in and then it goes. It's sunny. We experience the sunny weather, then it goes and it's raining. And it's like understanding that no emotion is ever permanent. So as with pain, as with happiness, it comes and goes, and let's just be with whatever we're feeling in the moment, and then be with it and be okay with letting it go. And that really shifts things for us and helps us to be able to not get stuck in the same way. So be aware of the narratives we create, filling in the blanks. So I could talk about this for a long time, but you know, we obviously, when we know little bits of things, our brain fills in the blanks. So somebody maybe is curt with us at work. Somebody kind of we sense is being rude. We create this whole story. Oh, I must have done this. They're mad at me because of this, this, and this. And oh, I'm such a jerk because, you know, we create this whole story, and generally we're wrong. Generally, most of the time when we do that, it's not correct. So be aware of those narratives and those stories that we make up, and challenging them is a big part of that kind of mindfulness. Understanding that I am coming in with my perspective and my worldview, and I need to realize that that's maybe I'm not right. I could be not right. I love Ellen Langer's work, and she defines mindfulness as the simple act of noticing things. I love that. Like, she recommends as a mindfulness practice, just trying to notice 5 new things, either in someone you're with or outside or in your space. Like, just the act of noticing things supports us to be in the present moment. Not all of us are in. I have a friend who is an MBSR teacher, mindfulness-based stress reduction, and she goes on like retreat. She goes away for like 10 days on silent retreats. And I think that sounds amazing, but some of us have like small children and we can't really do that. So the whole act of thinking of mindfulness this way feels really freeing for me, that I don't have to necessarily meditate for 3 hours a day. I can try to just actively notice things, and then I can be working on my mindfulness. So anyway, thinking about triggers, how do you think it would be when you add the element of self-compassion when you feel a trigger? How would you think that you would respond differently rather than reacting? Because sometimes we can be very reactive, but when we're practicing self-compassion, we're able to create space and respond instead of reacting to what's happening. And again, that whole thing, you can't heal what you can't feel. So a big piece of self-compassion is not just feeling our feelings, but it's also getting in our bodies, because we tend to be stuck in our heads a lot, right? We're really stuck in our heads. And part of self-compassion is just really like being present in our bodies, noticing sensations that are happening within our bodies. Like, am I feeling prickly right now? Are my muscles really sore? Like, being really present and in touch and interconnected with our bodies is a huge piece. That's why sometimes yoga and things like that can really be supportive of self-compassion practice. So then Kristen Neff talks about taking a self-compassion break, and that's basically doing something like this. You know, when you're having a hard moment at work, again, recommending the whole idea of touch. You know, we benefit the whole oxytocin release, that kind of soothing that is really important, especially when we think of children, how children need to be hugged and held and all that kind of thing. It's still a part of us as adults, but we don't acknowledge that very often. So the whole idea of just giving yourself a soft touch can really help to calm us down when we're feeling stressed. So just, if you're still on the call, just do that right now. Just take your hand and either put it on your arms or tuck it in your shirt right here, like just on your shoulder, close to your heart, and just see how that feels. It's afternoon. Okay, if you need to go, feel free to go. I'm almost done. But if you want to stick around, feel free to stick around. Like Regina said, we'll send a evaluation, and I'll also send the link to this. So if you could give us your feedback, that would be great. So anyway, do that. Notice how that feels. Notice how that makes you maybe breathe a little lighter. And yeah, it's really important. It's a great tool that you can pull out anytime, is just, you know, touch your arm or touch your neck like this. So I give myself hugs. Yes, for sure. That's why I use that picture at the beginning of the slides. So a self-compassion break is saying this is a moment of suffering. Suffering is a part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion I need. So write that down. Feel free to use it anytime you want. It's very effective. So people with higher levels of self-compassion are more likely to take personal responsibility for mistakes. Just a reminder that you aren't horrible or stupid when you make a mistake. You are beautifully imperfect and wonderfully made human. And really owning that is a big piece of self-compassion, owning the fact that that we have value. One thing we talk about a lot in mental health is, maybe I'll just say this really quickly. Hold all feedback from others loosely. So the feedback we hear from others is what we internalize and becomes our tape. So it can be either good stuff or bad stuff. And that can become our tape. So somebody can say an unkind word to us like 20 years ago and it stays stuck, right? Part of what we want to do with this is hold it all loosely. So though we crave it, sometimes positive feedback can be stunting for our self-worth as much as negative feedback is. And that might go, what? That doesn't make sense. But what happens if someone gives us, say, for example, you're doing a workshop and you get a bunch of evaluations. There's some really great ones. There's some bad ones. If we hold on to the positive, and then the next time we do it, we feel like we've done as good of a job, but maybe no one writes it down, then we can be really hard on ourselves. So one thing I have tried to do is try to just hold all of it loosely. And yeah, I draw on the teacher within and realize that no matter what other people say, we have value, right? And that's huge. Brené Brown talks about the idea of criticism, that sometimes people criticize us. And she says, if people aren't in the arena getting dirty themselves, then, you know, don't take what they say very seriously, but also it goes the other way, that we don't want to hold on to the positive too much either. So, and this is what Kristen Neff says about self-esteem. So unlike high self-esteem, which we talk about a lot in mental health, which has been associated with egotistic illusions and self-regulation failure. So example, adopting inappropriate goals that are beyond performance capabilities. Self-compassion should be linked to greater knowledge and clarity about one's own limitations, because individuals do not have to hide their shortcomings from themselves in order to maintain a positive self-image. So this is really important, because self-esteem when we talk about self-esteem, we're sometimes comparing ourselves to other people, whereas that's not helpful. It's helpful to think about it even in terms of self-worth. I use the term self-worth over self-esteem because then it's not going to go up and down according to making a mistake or screwing up or having a bad day or feeling disconnected. You know, I'm still going to have value no matter how I do, and that's super important. So self-esteem can go up and down depending on how we compare ourselves to others, and it's often based on pure approval, and that yo-yoing effect can be dangerous. There's always going to be someone better. There's always going to be someone who does better than us. But do we accept that with self-compassion, or do we become destabilized by that? And that's a huge, huge important thing. So self-worth comes from being kind to yourself. Self-worth that comes from being kind to yourself is much more stable than one that comes from judging yourself positively. And that's huge. So, and then the last slide is I'm going to encourage you what you can do today to take care of yourself. So I'm going to encourage all of you on the call, if people are still on, to write down on your paper or something in front of you, your planner, what are 2 things you're going to commit to do for your self-care before you leave today. And also, I definitely encourage you to use those tools that I shared around self-kindness meditation and self-compassion break, and it will be available for download later if you want a reminder about it. So thank you for joining us. I know we're a little late, so thank you. If you want to stick around and write in the chat, feel free to. Yeah, have a great day. Thank you.
Jen, that was awesome. Thank you. I'm sure you're taking a moment to center, perhaps a millisecond. There you go. We did have a question just from Dan who asked, how do you let go when it seems too much at any one time? And I don't know if you have if you're
let go.
A little insight on that.
How do you let go when it seems, I just need to kind of wrap my brain around that. So,
and I think that's all the details really Dan gave us, but I guess, sometimes we all feel a little bit overwhelmed and you just go, oh my goodness, yeah, it's just all a bit too much. And how do you just kind of...
I think the thing is here is how do you let go? And I think what self-compassion is not necessarily letting go. It's going, I'm having a hard time. It's like being with the struggle in the moment. And I think as we do that, and if we're having a hard time and we say, I'm having a hard time and I need to like feel the way I'm feeling and be okay with it and not have judgment around it, then it'll pass. If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. And I think, it's just being overwhelmed by things building up over time. And then I guess sometimes we're in that mode where you have to put a smiley face on because you have to get on with stuff. I guess it's just those dual places. And I guess you're just advising us to feel it and to take a moment out and feel that experience of being overwhelmed. It.
And one thing we didn't have time to get into here is also having self-compassion practices built into your lives. I have a worksheet that maybe I'll include in the download, is like thinking about how do you soothe your mind, how do you soothe your emotions, how do you soothe your body, and actually writing out some practices you can do, like having a hot cup of tea when you're overwhelmed can be an act of self-compassion, or having a bath. And it's like, I think we focus too much on those activities, and those activities are important, but when we do it as a method of self-soothing and giving ourselves self-compassion, it has much more depth than just saying, I'm going to go have a cup of tea. Right. You know what I'm saying? Right. So, and I think we can build practices like that, especially when we're learning, how to do all of this. It can help us to be able to kind of embrace self-compassion by doing some of those little activities.
So we know that it's 12:12, and it sounds like maybe some people are happy to chat away, so go for it. But we'll just do the formal thank you to both Manny and Jen for a really wonderful presentation. And I'm really proud that we have had this content. Not only is it high quality, but I think just linking it in with the competencies of practice, that just an acknowledgement that self-compassion and caring for ourselves, it's really not an add-on. It's part of what we need to do to be able to do the work we do. And so looking after ourselves is an essential component of being our best selves in our lives, and also being open and supportive of others as they journey on their journey. So thank you all for being with us. And we'll just leave the chat box open in case you have questions for Jen or Manny. And yeah, thanks. And this is a great comment to quit with. Jen, hope have a future webinar where we can do the practices together. So that's really helpful for us, that maybe there's some interest in that. Thank you.
Huh. Yeah, I like that idea.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right. Well, just maybe let's leave it there for now. There is a question about certificate, so maybe you could just email us. And we try not to do this, the carrot and the stick, but we just really ask you to please give us some feedback. So you don't have to give us feedback to get a certificate. But we're kind of struggling just getting people to give us a little bit of feedback. So anyways, that's just a gentle request. But if you would like a certificate, just email us, let us know. Right, Jen?
And the feedback is helpful because it also helps us to know what kind of webinars to book for the future. And I think honestly, like, I'm someone who kind of holds outcomes stuff a little bit loosely, but we also really need it. Mm-hmm. Having evaluations and things like that also can prove to funders and things that this is a valuable service, and hopefully we can get more. So it's helpful if you do it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All righty. Well, I know you guys have put your heart and soul into this morning, so I'm sure you need a cup of tea.